thoughts on some of the illegal immigration issues. I know it's a big topic that's been talked about for a long time. What are some of your thoughts on that, on what the country can do to start addressing that problem?
Yeah, there's a lot to say there. Not my favorite issue to talk about because it's not a 30-second sort of issue, but unfortunately we do have more than 30 seconds tonight. First thing is an observation. It's interesting to me as I've gone across the district that some parts of the district, this is probably the second issue for them behind gas prices. It is huge for them. And other parts of the district, it may not even be top 10. It might be kind of, well, I hear on talk radio, it kind of bothers me, but it's really not. I think without the talk radio emphasis, for those people, it wouldn't be top 10 at all. So that's the first thing that's interesting. So in this area, especially in this county and the surrounding counties, a little bit up to Bartholomew County with Columbus, it is a top tier issue there. So that's just an observation for what it's worth. In terms of the policy, again, to me it seems in some ways very simple, in other ways more complex. The simplicity of it is that if you're serious about illegal immigration, then you have to do two things. You have to enforce it at the border, and that's through some combination of fencing and virtual fencing and monitoring and on and on. And the second thing is you have to deal with the reason why they're coming, which is to get jobs. And so you have to penalize employers who at minimum knowingly hire illegal immigrants or don't do due diligence, whatever that looks like. That's the reason they're coming. Those who only emphasize a border fence, that would be akin to saying we're going to fight the war on drugs, whatever its merits. That's a different discussion. But whatever the merits of the war on drugs, we're going to fight that by only trying to stop it at the border. And then once it's in here, we're not going to pay any more attention to it. And we would look at that and say, well, you're not really serious about it then. Now, if you're serious about it, and if people are really serious about it, then you have to do those two things. You have to try and stop it at the border, and you have to try and stop the reason that they're coming here. It's a more complex matter, I think, than it's sold in the sense that a lot of times there's a difference between theory and practice when you deal with government. So I think a lot of times people sell those two things, especially the fence, as if it's going to solve everything. And to the point I just made, it's not going to solve everything because, again, you have to deal with it internally. And second, it's not going to solve everything because a fence is not going to stop everything. There was a story, it's been a couple of years ago now, but in Texas where illegal immigrants were cutting holes in fences, and the ranchers didn't like that because their livestock were getting out of the fence. And so there were actually cases where ranchers or farmers or something were putting ladders up against the fence because they didn't want people cutting holes in their fences, etc. So you can do all these things, but you know, there's a difference between theory and practice. And I think sometimes you know, people have acted as if, well, if we just kind of spend a little bit of money and do this, that, and the other, and then when you play with the numbers, you're like, that's not going to work. There's no way $2 billion or whatever the number was, there's no way, if you worked out the numbers about how many troops that would be, and there was no way that was going to be effective. So with any government intervention, you have to worry about the benefits and costs of what you're being sold. They're almost always going to exaggerate what they can deliver, and they're going to underestimate the costs, and I think immigration is one of those issues. Take it one more step further, I'm a huge fan of legal immigration. If people want to come here and be citizens and work hard, that's beautiful. First thing in economics is mutually beneficial trade, and so if people want to come here and engage in mutually beneficial trade with me and buy and sell and work and be a citizen, those sorts of things, that's beautiful. And we've done that for 200 some years. So I'm for I guess a high wall and a large gate, if you were going to put it into a metaphor. And one more thing to say here, actually, and I hear very few people talking about this, are the INS procedures. You know, if you spend any time talking to people who have tried to do it the right way, you'll hear all kinds of stories, right? You'll hear, you know, a Bill who will say, oh, it was no problem, you know, I just kind of did this, filled out some forms and paid some money and bingo. And then you'll hear a Titus, you know, hear a story from Titus, and they'll go, oh, it was horrible. It was, I had to get a lawyer, and I thought I was through, and then I wasn't, it cost me all this money, and on and on. If you want to tempt people to do the wrong thing, the illegal thing, make the right thing really tough for them to do. And so when our legal process, our legal way of coming here is made difficult, arbitrary, expensive, you're begging people to come here illegally. And so we, you know, again, we're talking about the government here, so I don't have a lot of optimism, but you know, INS procedures ought to be as streamlined, consistent, and inexpensive as is possible, so as not to tempt people to come here illegally.